Hey, what's happening, friend? Big dog Ethan here. My apologies for those awkward pauses there. It's kind of weird. I have to I have to like kind of sync up the audio because I record the audio and record the footage in different apps. Anyways, yeah, hi. Big Dog Ethan here. You're listening to WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is none other than the Unnatural State of Affairs, where I talk politics normally in the first hour, and then the second hour I play some banging tunes for you. However, this is one of those days where, I had very limited time, because guess what? It is the end of the semester. That's right, the end of the semester. And, so it's a lot faster for me to, just type up the script and deliver it live on the airwaves. So, anyways, I don't have terribly long segments to do for you today. Of course, I'm going to talk about all the escalations that have been going on in the Middle East. Pretty insane developments that we've been seeing for sure. And on top of that, I'm also going to do a bit of an unscripted chat segment about the VW Chattanooga UAW union election. That is honestly probably a bigger, I think it's probably like one of the biggest deals, biggest pieces of news that's happening in Tennessee right now, if you ask me. Because, we're a right-to-work state, and it's a pretty big deal. I'm going to get, I'll give you some more details on that in a second here. Without any further ado, I guess I should probably get into these escalations in the Middle East, because they're pretty disturbing. All right, so I wanted to let y'all know about what's going on in the Middle East, of course. So you remember how I said that Iran leaders were planning to retaliate against Israel for killing some of their military officials in an airstrike on their Syrian embassy? They held to their word. They definitely held to their word. I'm going to pull up an article from the Washington Post. It was published on April 14th. I'm having a few tech issues here, so my apologies about that. Alrighty, there we go. Boom. Oh, and boom. Quote, Iran launched a wave of missiles and drones toward Israel late Saturday as regional tensions continued to mount over the war in Gaza. President Biden condemned the attack and spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reiterate the United States' ironclad commitment to Israeli security, the White House said. Other allies, including Germany, Canada, France, and Britain, reaffirmed their support for Israel in the wake of the attack, while expressing fears that Tehran's assault could further destabilize the Middle East. Iranian state media said the missile and drone assault was in retaliation for a deadly Israeli strike on an Iranian diplomatic compound in Syria on April 1st. What happened? More than 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles were launched by Iran in the first full-scale military attack on Israel by Tehran. Around 99% of the projectiles were intercepted, according to Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the Israel Defense Forces spokesman. Side note, by the way, I didn't think to actually pull this up before writing the script. There's actually an article from The Intercept that demonstrated that the majority of those interceptions were done by U.S. forces in the air. both Britain and the United States also came to Israel's defense whenever they announced their attack. Which, by the way, they also gave a lot of heads up on that attack. I want to say it was at least like 3-4 hour warning or something like that. So they have plenty of heads up. And I mean, of course, it was probably something they should have expected because, they attacked an Iranian embassy in Syria, killing 7 military officials, including 2 Iranian generals. So, I mean, it probably would have been smart for them to expect that. Quote, some of the projectiles fell inside Israeli territory, and one damaged a military base in the country's south, Hagari said. A young girl who was seriously injured in the attack underwent surgery and was moved to the pediatric intensive care unit, according to Israel's Soroka Hospital. Another side note that's going to be important here in a second in my evaluation of this attack. Quote, Hagari said a quote-unquote coalition of countries helped Israel with intercepting the projectiles. The U.S. military helped Israel take down, quote, nearly all, unquote, of the drones and missiles, Biden said. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and Rishi Sunak said Britain's Royal Air Force shot down, quote, a number of Iranian attack drones, unquote, while Jordan's cabinet said it, quote-unquote, dealt with objects that flew through its airspace overnight. France also contributed technological support, Hagari said. Tehran's attack on Saturday was, quote-unquote, four-pronged, according to a report by the state-run Tasnim news agency. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Originating from sites in Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. The commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Major General Hossein Salami, called Tehran's attack, quote, more successful than we had expected, unquote, and warned that any retaliation by Israel would draw a more forceful response. That's going to be a key thing here that I'll touch on as well once I get through this next paragraph. Quote, at a United Nations Security Council meeting Sunday, Iran and Israel traded blame over the recent escalation. Iran's ambassador said the Iranian attack was a, quote, necessary and proportionate, unquote, response to an earlier Israeli strike on an Iranian consular building in Syria, while his Israeli counterpart said Iran's actions, quote, crossed every red line, unquote. So, yeah, and an April 14th live update from NBC News reported that an Iranian representative at the UN Security Council claimed that civilians were not targeted in his attack. Or in the attack. That wasn't his attack. Whoopsie. I'm not going to take that claim at face value, of course. Obviously, there is an incentive to not be upfront about that. Israel did report that one child was wounded in the attack, but that's not necessarily evidence of a targeted attack towards civilians. To elaborate, I want to turn to an October 19th, 2023 video from an Al Jazeera article. And for those who are watching the video recording, hey, there's my friend Derek. Got a little bit distracted there. So for those of you who are watching the video recording, you're actually seeing me click through my notes because I totally forgot to pull up all the links before the recording started. So oopsie daisy. Anyways. To elaborate, I want to turn to an October 19th, 2023 video from Al Jazeera. I'm kind of skipping to the right point here. Oh, and that reminds me, too, I do need to be sure that I... bumping into the mic there. I do need to be sure that I broadcast this. Let me be sure I have the aux cable up. And then the volume. Okay, wonderful. All right, I'm going to start about 2 minutes in.
This is the rocket in question.
And again, this is from Al Jazeera's Twitter on October 19th, 2023.
15 seconds later, Al Jazeera's live feed shows that the same rocket was intercepted at exactly 18:59:50. This interception has the same afterglow seen in previous interceptions. A closer look at the video captured by the Al Jazeera live feed shows the rocket being completely destroyed and broken apart in the sky. According to all feeds and videos analysed, this rocket was intercepted and was the last one launched from Gaza before the bombing of the hospital.
I am just now realizing, actually, I'm probably playing that a little bit too early because I probably need to give y'all a little bit of context. For those who may not remember, early on in the plausible genocide in Gaza, the Al-Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza blew up, and for a brief period, conflicting reports emerged on the causes. Israel claimed it was a misfired rocket from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, while Palestinian officials blamed it on Israel. Al Jazeera analyzed footage of the event, and, well, it was kind of both. That's the context I meant to provide earlier, before I started playing the video, so my apologies. I'm a little bit scatterbrained today.
The Al Jazeera live feed shows the rocket being completely destroyed and broken apart in the sky. According to all feeds and videos analysed, this rocket was intercepted and was the last one launched from Gaza before the bombing of the hospital. 5 seconds after that interception, an explosion in Gaza can be seen, followed 2 seconds later by a much larger explosion. This is the strike that hit Al-Ahli Arab Hospital. As a result, Al Jazeera Digital Investigations team found no grounds to the Israeli army claim that the strike on the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital in Gaza was caused by a failed rocket launch.
So here's the thing that I should note too, and I probably should just explain it a little bit more because of the confusing nature of the way I talked about that. So basically, whenever this hospital was blown up, again, Israel was claiming that it was a misfired rocket from a Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, and Palestinian officials were blaming it on Israel. And what Al Jazeera found is that it's kind of a mix of both. They give a different claim at the end, which I'm kind of confused by that, because, I think what they kind of like meant to say was, hey, this wasn't just something that was caused by this Islamic Jihad group. It was also in part, something that was caused by the Iron Dome. I don't know what you'd call it. I guess the Iron Dome system. And for those who don't know, the Iron Dome system, it's like it's basically this machine that's kind of like placed in the center of. I actually don't know if it's like if it covers if it protects all of Israel or just the city that borders the Gaza Strip. But in either case, the Iron Dome, basically, it's like this automatic missile launcher that it's basically launched every time that a Hamas militant launches a rocket that crosses over into Israeli territory, or at least what's considered Israeli territory. If you ask some people, that's occupied Palestinian territory. So that's what the Iron Dome or the Iron Dome system is. And what this video was showing was that whenever someone from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group launched a missile, it collided with one of these Iron Dome missiles, and that debris fell down onto this hospital, the Al-Ali Arab Hospital. Now, I haven't been able to verify this speculation, but I remember Breaking Point's doing a segment on this tragedy, and what they had mentioned was that the debris from the interception hit a parking lot with a bunch of cars in it, which, of course, a lot of cars, got gasoline in them. Kaboom. And it should be noted, of course, that, many already wounded or sick civilians were killed in the process. And that is, again, another result of, Israel's indiscriminate bombing of the Gaza Strip. Because, I have to keep it real with you here. This whole conflict is basically stemming from Israel's obstinance to grant Palestinians independence. For those who don't know, the Gaza Strip, it is, there's like a literal fence around the Gaza Strip, and it is a tightly controlled border. Even before October 7th, it was a tightly controlled border, and it essentially is an open air prison. And to be very clear, what happened on October 7th is unjustifiable because civilians were targeted in those attacks. So I want to make that very clear. But whenever one considers the conditions of the Gaza Strip, and whenever one also considers that even peaceful protests were actually attempted, there's a documentary on YouTube that you can find. It's called Gaza Fights for Freedom. It's directed by Abby Martin. And it depicts that whenever, Palestinians peacefully organized, civil rights era style and marched towards the fence that, that surrounds the Gaza Strip, they were gunned down. A lot of civilians were killed. I think even a journalist too. And so whenever one considers that, it becomes very clear that really the Palestinians' only way of actually obtaining self-determinance in a democratic society is resistance. That said, though, resistance does not necessarily mean or doesn't justify targeting civilians. From what I understand, and actually, this is more colloquially known because, I think Israel put out a little infographic, highlighting military, IDF soldiers that were killed and IDF members that were killed on October 7th, and also civilians that were killed. And it was about a 55 to 45% civilian death rate, which is inexcusable. And as I said, actually in the first recorded show that I uploaded to The Kennel, my podcast, it's absolutely true that, yes, Hamas should be tried for war crimes because they did target civilians. That said, though, yes, resistance for the Palestinian people is absolutely justified. And by the way, I'm only talking about the Gaza Strip. That is still excluding what's going on in the West Bank, where you have all these military checkpoints that, the West Bank is another thing, maybe to talk about for another day. But the gist of it is there are a lot of these settlements out there in the West Bank. And, it varies from settlement to settlement, but some of these settlements have been deemed acceptable under international law, and also there are a lot of them that have been deemed to violate international law. These settlements are a blatant invasion of Palestinian territory, and the fact that the UN and especially the United States have really done nothing to hold Israel accountable to international law is unacceptable. And again, it justifies the morality of armed, internationally legal resistance against their oppressors. So, yeah. My point in bringing all this up, though, about the hospital and is that, especially with missile attacks over occupied Palestinian land, targeted attacks on military facilities can be intercepted, and the falling debris can kill civilians without them actually being targeted in the process. Now, some might try to do a debate bro bit and say, oh, well then, why do you assume that Israel's attacks are targeting civilians? Is it because you're anti-Semitic? And my response to that would be no, because for one, criticizing Israel is not inherently anti-Semitic, just like criticizing Iran or the Taliban or Saudi Arabia is not inherently Islamophobic. In fact, it's actually anti-Semitic to assume that criticism of Israel is inherently anti-Semitic, as the assumption must stem from a conflation of Judaism with Zionism, the latter of which many Jewish people do not align with. But more importantly, Israel's intentions in targeting civilians can easily be demonstrated by Israeli officials' statements equating all 2.1 million Gaza civilians to Hamas combatants, like Israeli President Isaac Herzog's assertion that all Palestinians are guilty for the October 7th attacks because Hamas members were elected to positions of power in 2006 and never held an election since. There is no way. So first off, even if we assume that that any war crimes that elected officials commit automatically make make their citizens also guilty of violating international law. Oh my gosh, the U.S. citizens would be, all of them would be prosecuted for multiple atrocities, right? We can go over the basics, Guantanamo Bay, invading Iraq, without having any clear evidence of an immediate threat to our national security, because that evidence, the claim to have evidence of weapons of mass destruction were total lies. There's also, of course, the Vietnam War. I think historically we like to think that, it was just, an innocent mistake that was well-intentioned because we were trying to take on the evil communist, right? And no, that's a lot of the atrocities in the Vietnam War, especially if you read a book like Manufacturing Consent. Not only would you learn just how complicit the news media outlets were in not informing the public about those atrocities, but you'd also learn about the simple facts of the destruction that we brought there to Vietnam, and what's happening now in Israel. The events of Saturday night, they kind of echo these same fears that have been cited by anti-war activists over and over and over again. Namely, that threats of world war are not something to be taken lightly. Anti-war activists have been saying this same kind of message since Israel began bombing the hell out of Gaza. This is not going to end well. This is going to explode into a wider regional conflict. And last night's events kind of suggested we're already at that point. Personally, I think they did suggest that we're already at that point. The AP reported this morning, and again, for those who are watching the video version, you are seeing my notes. Oh man, that's embarrassing. The AP reported this morning that, according to Iranian officials, Israel allegedly launched a drone attack on a nuclear facility at Isfahan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. because I definitely watched a couple of videos, even just today, that I know the people talking in those videos pronounced it that way. Anyways, the AP article also cites a Middle East Institute analyst who says that it was actually an airstrike that was responsible for the attacks in Iran, not a drone. This analyst was saying that some jets flew across Syrian airspace, taking out some air defense weapons in Syria along the way, and then fired at the nuclear facility while still over Iraqi territory. Obviously this is all very recent news, so this is all subject to change. The good news is that the International Atomic Energy Association reported no damage to the nuclear facility, and that Iran, as of now at least, has not announced any specific plans to retaliate. But they also did say after their strike on Israel last Saturday that they would respond to any retaliation from Israel. So yeah, I'm not getting my hopes up, but I'm not also assuming that Iran will respond. Now, obviously, the state of Israel simply has a lot of blame to hold here for what's happening in the Middle East. The main reason why Iran, why there's been a lot of talk of Iran getting involved, even right after October 7th, was that they fund Hamas, and they also fund a couple of other Islamic groups that surround the occupied Palestinian territories. And obviously they've had a pretty tense relationship with Israel. And considering the events that have been going on in Gaza now for the past 6 months, where you've got Israel, who's racked up a 90.8% civilian death rate according to the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, then it's quite obvious that the state of Israel does have a lot of blame to hold here. They could have responded in a way that was valued international law, but instead they decided to participate in the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. And as Hamas and as other factions around Israel are kind of proxies of Iran, well, now Iran has an obligation to them to somehow support them in their defense now. As I noted last week as well, again, Israel is also the one who decided to violate international law by firing a missile at an Iranian embassy in Syria, killing 7 Iranian military officials, including 2 generals. So Israel holds a lot of blame in this conflict. But there's also another group who also holds a lot of blame for the further destabilization of the Middle East. And we're going to talk about just who that other group is right after this break. Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here. You're listening to WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is none other than the Unnatural State of Affairs. So, who is this other group who holds a lot of blame for the escalation that's going on, that's been happening for the past, past 6 months in the Middle East? Really, you could argue for a long time. The Biden administration. It holds just as much blame here for the attacks for the past week, Israel's genocide in Gaza. And the main reason for that is that Biden has consistently been receiving clear messages that the general public, his constituents, and even the staffers of his State Department do not want us to keep sending unconditional aid to Israel. That message has been communicated clearly to him in the polls through the Vote Uncommitted movement, which has demonstrated in presidential primaries that Biden could easily lose some key swing states in the general election. The polls are also showing that the general public does not support Israel's actions. And I'm going to switch over to the source view here. So approval has dropped from 50 to 36% since November of Israel's absolute atrocities. And that's according to Gallup, by the way. That's March 27th, 2024 poll. Additionally, waves of public protest have also demonstrated this too. This from AP News. This is a picture, not just pictures. This is an article covering a global day of protest, which drew thousands in Washington and other cities in pro-Palestinian marches. That's kind of me quoting the title of that article. I mean, we've been seeing a lot of waves of public protest, and I was kind of hoping to speak about this. I was kind of hoping to speak about this at the for this show, but unfortunately, I didn't really have the time to fit it in. But there's also been a lot of protests happening at Columbia University too. Now, thankfully. I don't think there have been any reporters who've gotten arrested. And matter of fact, actually, Columbia has an amazing journalism school. It's world renowned to an extent, and they actually put out a tweet saying, "Hey, if any reporters want to come cover the protests that are going on at Columbia University and the suppression of students, they said." They would basically get them access onto the private campus, which is always good to see journalists help another journalist. But unfortunately, the administration at Columbia University, very much like Vanderbilt, has not been taking very kindly to their protests. So as kind of a homage, I think the H is silent in that. Anyways, as kind of an homage to a series of 1968 protests where so you basically had a faction of white students. It was the Students for a Democratic Society. They started camping out on I believe it was the campus quad, if I'm not mistaken, to protest Columbia University's involvement in the military. They found that that the school had some connections, I think, with a military weapons contractor, and of course, this is at the height of the Vietnam War, which, they protested that for a good time. And at one point too, they even so I mentioned that there's a faction of white protesting students. There was also a coalition of black student protesters who were trying to protest the building of a new facility that that was near a predominantly black area of New York. I think it might have been Harlem, but I can't remember for sure. They were trying to protest they were also trying to protest basically the building or the construction of this building. And, whenever the Students for a Democratic Society showed up to the building, because I can't remember exactly, for some reason they had to move to another place to protest. They basically got into a bit of a standoff with this other group. Anyways, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, or I'm kind of going off on a tangent about that. The point being is that the students who are protesting today at Columbia University, they're essentially doing the same thing that the Students for a Democratic Society was doing, where they were protesting out on the campus quad by literally setting up tents there, and they have a big sign that says Liberation Zone. So anyways, the school administration called the NYPD, and the NYPD came down there and they arrested about 100 of those student protesters. Interestingly enough, the Columbia student newspaper, I think it was called the Columbia Spectator, if I'm not mistaken. They had actually said, or they reported, whenever they interviewed an NYPD official, that official basically said, Yeah, no, we didn't have any issues with the protesters. They were all peaceful, and they were, engaging in nothing but legally, or legal and constitutional free speech. Which begs the question then, why the hell were they called there in the first place? And my suspicion is that Columbia University, and I probably didn't specify this, but it's basically the same kind of protest or the same call to action that the Vanderbilt Divestment Coalition made. Remember, they did their sit-in at their chancellor's office. The Columbia, these students at Columbia were demanding that that Columbia School Administration divest from all of their partnerships with businesses in Israel, because effectively, what that is doing is it is financially supporting a nation that is in the midst of committing a plausible genocide. And that's not my word. That's the word of the International Court of Justice. So, yeah, quite insane to be seeing the suppression of student protesters there as well. But anyways, so a lot of protests are happening. There's a lot of dissent being demonstrated by student protesters around our country's complicity in these atrocities. And we are now finding ourselves further involved in an escalating Middle East war because Biden has no spine, and he's only willing to wag his finger at some of Israel's blatant war crimes, and, by the way, denying other war crimes that they commit, despite the fact that they're well documented. And as he does all that, he also asserts none of his legitimate power to restrain the Israeli Defense Force in their indiscriminate bombing of the Gaza Strip. And his legitimate power is conditioning aid to Israel. I talked about this in previous shows. This is something that the Reagan administration did. This is something that the George Bush Sr. administration did. Reagan essentially made one phone call to, if I'm not mistaken, it was the prime minister at the time. Israel was conducting a bunch of bombings in Lebanon, and he was literally like, dude, this looks like the Holocaust. And he requested him to not, to basically stop what he was doing, and, or else, he would face the consequences. George Bush, it was a little more complicated. It was basically what he was trying to do was trying to rein in Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and he would essentially condition loans to Israel depending on the legality, the international legality of those settlements. So this is something that other presidential administrations have done in the past, yet Biden is refusing to do that despite overwhelming evidence that Israel is, at the very least, committing a plausible genocide. And why is he not exercising this power? As I said in the last segment that broadcasted on Friday, money talks. Biden, along with a ghastly number of representatives and senators in Congress, has been swimming in donations from defense contractor-related political action committees and pro-Israel lobbying groups. And, of course, I'm opening those up right now. So, for those who are watching the video version, you can already see this on screen, but between 1990 and 2024, so this isn't even all of Biden's. This isn't even the entirety of Biden's career. We are just talking about from 1990 until this year. Biden has taken $5,736,701 from pro-Israel lobbying groups. That's according to Open Secrets. And furthermore, this guy has taken $3 million, $322,048 from defense contractor-related political action committees and other types of like groups that are associated with that industry. Now, granted, I should note that that's actually the industry with the least amount of donations, unless if you count the other sector, which is basically like a bunch of different sectors that Open Secrets just didn't categorize. But nonetheless, it's a hefty sum of money that, of course, Biden is going to consider whenever he's making his policy decisions in office, because if you're a careerist like him, the main thing that's important to you is that you get reelected, and you're only getting reelected if you got the money in the campaign coffers. This soulless, decaying corpse in the White House engages in legalized corruption that plagues our political system today, preferring to represent the status quo by taking large sums of campaign donations from corporate-affiliated lobbying groups rather than small-dollar donations from ordinary citizens. If the opposite were the case, if he actually funded his campaign from the grassroots rather than corporate donors, maybe we wouldn't see such an unwillingness from him to actually listen to the people. Maybe we'd at least have a real semblance of democracy rather than a cheap facade. Maybe our state of affairs wouldn't be so unnatural as it is today. Alrighty, well, it is 5:48. Dang, this segment took a lot longer than I expected. So, but I am quite proud of myself. If you couldn't tell, there was a little bit of going off script there, and I only had to hit the mistake button once during that. So, anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go on a quick break, and then I'll be right back to give you all a very, very brief rundown of what's going on with the UAW, and yeah, then I'll be out of here until next week. So yeah. Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here. You're listening to WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we are coming up on the end of the Unnatural State of Affairs for today. Before I leave y'all, I did at least want to provide some brief commentary on what's going down at the Chattanooga plant in I was going to say Tennessee, but I'm sure many of our listeners already know where Chattanooga is located at. But anyways, yeah, there's a unionization drive happening at this plant. Of course, it's being spearheaded by the UAW. Now, here's the big deal about it, okay? Tennessee is largely, not just largely, it is a right-to-work state. We are very much an anti-union state, actually to the point even where, and I learned about this through my coverage of the United Campus Workers fight for biweekly pay. I've been covering that for Sidelines. And unions of state employees, they are not allowed to collectively bargain at all with their state employer. To quote one of the sources from the UCW that I interviewed quite a few times, he said this to me on the record, but this quote didn't get into one of the articles that I published. He said, the state is afraid of collective power. And I think he's absolutely right about that. Yeah. And I think the best evidence for this is the way in which Governor Bill Lee has responded to this. And of course, again, there's also just evidence in the fact that we're a right-to-work state. And for those who don't know, right-to-work state, it basically, so there are some states where if there is, kind of like an established union for a certain, for a certain business, some unions will require, require your membership in the union as part of you getting the job. You cannot work that job without being in the union. Now, there's a reason for this, right? It basically ensures that there is a democratic, there is some kind of democratic body within the workplace so that you don't just have one boss, one manager, or series of bosses and managers just telling you what to do without you having much power to advocate for yourself. Unions are purely a strength in numbers kind of organization. And there are also specific industries too where those kind of protections are honestly essential. You could talk about construction, right? You could talk about railway workers, coal miners. I personally, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but also, I definitely know it's not controversial among my friends in the YDSA, but I'm speaking for more of maybe more conservative-minded folks. In the entertainment industry, there is a lot of ways for workers to be abused in the entertainment industry. And case in point, for those who haven't seen the new documentary Quiet on Set about how Nickelodeon, just had no concern whatsoever about the fact that there were definitely some child predators that were allowed to work there around the kids. And on top of that, one of their big guys there, Dan Schneider, while there is definitely, no evidence to suggest that he was a child predator, there certainly was enough evidence to suggest that he really lacked any kind of awareness of appropriate workplace behavior, and especially whenever it came to being around kids, he could be a pretty kind of intimidating and unprofessional fella. So, but anyways, there are a lot of industries where being in a union, it is kind of essential just for the protection of the worker. And I personally would argue that yes, unions. I personally think that unions need to grasp as much power in every workplace that they can, because these are institutions that, again, they provide a democratic voice for the worker who normally, without that union, will not have much of a voice in the workplace. They are not going to have much negotiating power to advocate for themselves. If they feel like they're not being paid enough, if they feel like the working conditions aren't safe enough, or if they feel like they're being overworked, unions are an effective tool to advocate for the worker, and that's what these workers at the VW plant are essentially trying to do. They are trying to establish a democratic voice within their workplace. And, from what I've seen so far, so the results are going to come out tonight. They're going to come out later tonight. I'm certainly going to be keeping up with them, and they're definitely going to be up by the time I get an upload put up. By the time that I upload this recording onto the kennel, they're certainly going to be up. So I'll probably put that update in the description of this, the recording of this episode of the Unnatural State of Affairs, which, by the way, you'll be able to find that at thekennel.substack.com. Again, that address where you can find the video versions of these shows is thekennel.substack.com. Now, obviously, I can put the music on there, but the copyrighted music that I play for like DJ sessions, but you will hear the uncensored versions of the recorded talk show segments that I do. Of course, there's not going to need to be any kind of censoring for this one because I'm broadcasting it live. So, also wanted to throw out there too regarding this union effort is that, of course, folks like Governor Bill Lee are very much anti-union, anti-worker, frankly. And he's been doing a lot of advocacy to try to convince workers that not having democratic representation in their workplace is a good thing. So anyways, and whenever one considers how, according to Open Secrets, for his last campaign in 2018, this guy took $10,000 from General Motors. He took $11,800 from FedEx Corp, who, by the way, is not unionized. They are not a unionized mailing service. Whenever one considers the kinds of donors that he takes money from, it's no wonder why he espouses the views that he espouses. So, I stand in full solidarity with the workers at the UAW, and I absolutely hope to see a blowout victory for them. Which, based on what I've heard so far, they've been signing a lot of union cards. I've heard something like over half of them have signed union cards, so that's a good sign. And in a state like Tennessee, a southern state where unions hold little power, that is a damn good sign. That's a damn good sign. Alrighty, well, that's all I've got to talk about for today, friends. Frankly, I could talk more, but it's 6 o'clock and I am out of time. So, I'll hopefully be back next week. It is going to be my last show this semester, and then I'm going to be gone for this summer. I'll be sure to update you on what I'll be doing next summer, or this summer, because it's some pretty cool stuff I'm going to be doing. But anyways, for now, I got a dip. Hope you have a good one, friend. Hey, friend, that's all I've got for today, but thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Unnatural State of Affairs. The Unnatural State of Affairs broadcasts on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee from
4 to 6 p.m. on Fridays.
The broadcasted version is censored, but I do also have a full DJ hour in the broadcasted version. I mostly play punk rock music and some rap music as well. And if you can't tune in at that time, though, you can also find the uncensored versions of all my talk show segments that day on my Substack, The Kennel, and you can also find audio-only versions on Spotify. If you liked what I had to say, hit that like button. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, hit me up in the comments section down below. And if you want to be notified of the next upload that I make, hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email in your inbox the next time I make an upload, and you'll also get a notification through the Substack app if you have that on your device. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.